to the January 19th edition of Global Nashville with Karl Dean. I'm Patrick Ryan, president of the Tennessee World Affairs Council. Tonight, we're going to be talking with Ralph Schulz, president and chief executive officer of the Nashville Area Chamber of Commerce. Mr. Schulz joined Mayor Dean for our first Global Nashville webinar episode last April 14th. He was asked, how was business in Nashville prior to the pandemic? And he responded, quote, "The business and the economy for this whole region was just exploding in a positive way. We were one of the first cities in the country to come out of the recession. And really for about almost 10 years, we've been seeing a meteoric rise in jobs, a meteoric rise in population. And so just prior to the pandemic, everything looked pretty rosy and with high momentum going forward into the future. This evening, we'll explore what that future is now and more." Ralph Schulz was named president and CEO of the Nashville Area Chamber of Commerce in November 2006, following a 30-year career in nonprofit management, marketing, and fundraising. In taking the position, he accepted a leadership role at one of Middle Tennessee's oldest and largest business federations, an organization dating back to its founding in 1847. Good evening, Mayor Dean, and welcome, Mr. Schulz.
Good evening, Pat. Thank you. And hi, Ralph. How are you?
Living the dream.
The dream. Well, I can't believe that it's been since April since you've been with us for a podcast. And you think back now, it was April 14th. It's kind of like tonight. April 14th was the eve of taxes being due, right? Although there was some sort of put off you could use with the pandemic. And then tonight is the eve of the Biden administration.
The inauguration.
The inauguration tomorrow. And so on April 14th, if my memory serves me well, we were into the pandemic by only, in terms of day-to-day effect on life, probably about 6 weeks. But it was a somewhat serious and somber conversation we had about how, Pat just talked about where Nashville was before the pandemic, and certainly things kind of ground to slowed down, not to a stop, but things ground down pretty severely during the spring. And now we're at sort of another phase now where deaths are up, and we have the vaccines online, and there's light at the end of the tunnel. But it has been a long 8 months since we've talked. A lot has happened.
I remember saying at the beginning of May, does anybody else feel like it's been a year since 2 weeks ago? It was, the shutdown was really hard. And it's hard on a lot of small business. But again, I still have faith that the small business closures that we're going to experience are going to be smaller in Nashville and in this region than they are in other places. Throughout this pandemic, we've gotten kind of a steady diet of phone calls from small business owners that are now looking for a job. And that always makes my chest tighten up a little bit because, our small business owners have put everything into their business, maybe a lifetime, and now just because of bad timing, that business is gone. But lately, I've seen a trend toward businesses that are kind of going into hibernation. Business owners may be seeking temporary work, but they're not necessarily seeking a new career. They're planning on reopening their businesses. But yeah, the shutdown was very, very difficult. And even the return, although slow, Nashville, we continue to forecast a quick recovery from this pandemic in the future. We're saying end of second quarter now. And when you and I met before, nobody knew how long that could be.
Right. And do you have any figures or sense on what the damage has been to Nashville in terms of the economy?
Well, we know that we've lost fundamentally a full year's GDP growth. So when our economy is restored, We were at $132 billion economy for the region last February. And when we consider the economy fully restored, which again will be sometime this summer, will be at $123 billion economy. Our unemployment, if you look at federal unemployment numbers right now, they say we're at a 4.5% or so unemployment rate, but that's not including the people that are getting benefits. So the real unemployment in this area is more like 9%. And we expect that to drop somewhere in the 4 to 5% range, by late in 21. The big drag on the economy is going to be the restoration of the hospitality industry in this area. And a lot of that is driven just by policy. It's driven by corporate travel policy. It's driven by when people can meet and when people can return to conventions. Leisure travel is probably going to come back pretty fast, once that vaccine gets established. But if we see most of the economy restored by the end of the second quarter, we see that hospitality economy restored about 6 months later.
And what's your sense of how the vaccine effort is going in Tennessee and Middle Tennessee?
Well, the organization around it is pretty strong, but the supply has been a little bit sporadic. I know in the last week or so, there was much more capability to give the vaccine than the vaccine that was available. There had been a short dip in the availability of the vaccine. But everything that we're hearing says that production capacity is rising, and the ability to get the vaccine out there is pretty strong. Honestly, again, just because we're familiar with the distribution efforts, Tennessee had a pretty good plan, and right from the start, they were getting vaccine into a lot of people.
Yeah, and sort of what we're hearing now, President-elect Biden is saying 100 days that they'll get 100,000. How many people they're talking about having vaccinated in 100 days? That will get us a long way to getting out of this, I think.
Yeah, to the herd immunity. Yeah, that would be great to be able to hit those numbers. And I don't confer with him, but I have my fingers crossed.
Yeah, well, he sounds confident. Since the last time we talked, also we had the events around the death of George Floyd in Nashville.
Mm-hmm.
And the civic disturbances that were there. I mean, obviously, most of it was largely peaceful, but there were disturbances in the downtown area where obviously the courthouse was severely damaged during all this. How did that impact business? Was there?
I think it obviously, when events like that occur, it impacts all those businesses that suffered immediate damage. And, this past year, it's been one challenge after another for a lot of businesses, and especially small businesses. So, it didn't really affect Nashville per se. I mean, go down on Broadway and you still see visible action down on Broadway even now. But I think, every one of those disasters, when they befall a company, if it's your business that is a focal point in that disaster, it's something that you have to contend with. I mean, I've often said that, when we have a tornado and when we have a flood and when we have these kinds of community-wide disasters, I'm always thinking about that individual business owner and that individual employee and what that disaster means to them. Because, as we talked during the flood, if you don't have a job, it's hard to recover. And so business recovery is really an important feature. So bottom line on it is that I think that violence shocked people in Nashville who weren't used to that type of display. But by and large, I don't think it it just made Nashville a little more focused on, we really have to be thinking about the whole community as compared to just
Right. I mean, certainly, there was violence, but overall, it was peaceful, and I think it was clearly was a spontaneous reaction to horrible events in Minnesota and other places around the country, in the sense that not everybody necessarily is being treated fairly, or policing is not perfect. How does that factor into the business world in your terms of, you're talking about the city, talking about the future? Do you think Nashville has responded appropriately to the questions that were raised by Black Lives Matter and countless other organizations and people of all ethnic groups and nationalities?
Yeah, I think Nashville has developed a reputation for encouraging diversity in the community. So that on one level, Carl, as you know, visitors to this town used to be surprised at the diversity that was present here. When they got here, they were surprised at it. I know that a lot more people are aware of the diversity that exists in Nashville. I think generally Nashville is seen as a place that responds well to any of these circumstances. And I think we've seen clearly from business leaders and our elected officials that they intend to do things that create more opportunity and more benefit for the whole population. And I think that serves Nashville well. People notice it.
Yeah. And then after that, of course, the pandemic continued, in some ways gotten worse. And then on Christmas Day, we have the bombing on Second Avenue, which,
Yeah, 2020 ended just in time, didn't it?
what did, what's the impact of that? I mean, I would think in many ways that would have potentially an impact on the entire hospitality industry, and certainly about the vitality of downtown, at least a limited impact for hopefully a short duration.
Yeah, I think Second Avenue, as you know, is a key part of the brand of Nashville. And so the restoration of that space and restoration of those businesses are important to hospitality going forward. It's a complicated process for those property owners and business owners and those tenants down there. You've got, Metro involved, you've got insurance companies involved, you've got tenants involved, you've got all different layers of the historical commission, different layers of engagement in restoring that space. But restoring that space is going to be important to Nashville's hospitality brand. I think it was, again, another startling event, but fundamentally, I think people, in the responses I'm hearing from around the country, that event, it does not change the view people have of the experience that they have when they come to Nashville. They're still coming here for the music, the entertainment, the fun, the friendliness. And what I'm hearing from around the country and the people that call me, that event didn't necessarily change it.
Did people reaching out to you from chambers around the country, or contacts you've made over the years, was it a large number? Because it was such a kind of it was Christmas Day, slow news day, biggest, shocking event.
Yeah, it was one of those things where it unfolded slowly. I mean, the response that was coming from around the country, is really kind of a 2 or 3 day affair that didn't ramp up immediately. Again, from your experience as mayor, that there are things that go into gear when disasters like that occur. But as far as hearing from people around the country, I heard from a lot of people around the country, but it took 3 days sometimes for some people to get the news.
Right. And yeah. So now we're up to the present here with a new administration coming in tomorrow. What does a new administration mean to the leading business organization for Middle Tennessee, and what do you think it means to Nashville?
Well, anytime there's a change in administration, you're curious to see what the areas of focus on are. we've been working for a long time, and this chamber's been working for a long time on immigration policy. And perhaps this is an opportunity for immigration policy to be addressed by the administration. You know, when we get down, in the next few months, as this economy recovers, we're going to be right back to a scarce workforce again. And we know workforce is really key to job growth, and job growth is key to expansion of opportunity. So, we're anxious for anyone who can be productive in our economy to be a part of this economy. So, hopefully we're going to see policy that stimulates that business growth, or if it doesn't stimulate, at least it allows the marketplace to invest and to grow on a global basis as well as a national basis.
Yeah. And I guess, it's been promised, I guess we'll see, but I would assume that there'll be more infrastructure dollars, more money available to state and local government than we've seen in the prior administration. And that could have an effect. But overall, you think Nashville is going to go back fairly quickly once the pandemic is, who knows when it's officially declared over, but when it seems to be under control, that we'll go back to strong employment numbers and a growing economy.
Oh yeah, I think the basics that we have in place, the fact that we have a diverse and balanced economy that had portions of the economy doing well while others were taking a bit of a hiatus. I think the fact that we have a strong entrepreneurial contribution to our GDP, that's a very adaptive group. We're also seeing on the sidelines as we're doing this forecast, I'm hearing from people who want to invest in Nashville, and when they call, they want to know, they know what the high demand industry is in Nashville and where the growth is going to be, and they're looking for investment opportunities. So I think all of those things, balanced economy, diverse economy, strong entrepreneurial component to the economy, are all going to work in our favor. But the other thing that works in our favor is just lifestyle. People want to live in Nashville, and we're seeing an in-migration to Nashville that has continued through this COVID pandemic. Mostly people coming here from larger cities, but they're young, they're educated, and they're attracted to the lifestyle in Nashville.
One of the common areas that we have is an interest in public education, and I think a belief that public education is key to the city's future. You just had the report card come out from the chamber, and the chamber, and I've always said this, the chamber deserves a ton of credit for consistently year in, year out, making education a top priority. What did the report card say this year?
What the report card really said was that there needs to be more resources directed at education, and there needs to be a convening. I mean, the essence of the important recommendations was that there needed to be a convening of forces within the community to really focus on bringing our education performance up to a higher level. I think there were 6 recommendations from the report card committee, or the report committee today. But if you look at the general theme of what they were recommending, there's a need for resource, there's a need for innovation, and there is a need for a convening of all of the potential contributors to making our education system better. I would tell you one last thing on this from a chamber perspective. We're looking at 5 aspects that can improve education, from supporting teachers properly with compensation and other forms of support, to funding of the schools, to innovation in the schools. I think we're seeing a pilot on the use of technology with the schools right now, and I know there are a lot of lessons being learned.
Right. How do you feel about we've had this process, this pandemic that's gone on for 8, 9 months now. How hard is it going to be for us to regain the momentum that schools had? How hard is it going to be to bring the students up to where they should be? I mean, I know there's been heroic efforts by parents, heroic efforts, especially by teachers, to keep things on track, but it has been an incredible challenge. And so, do you see supplemental things that have to be done in the short term just to get us back up to where we need to be for these students?
The answer is yes. I mean, we hear from the experts, and these are experts that are in Nashville, at Peabody, at Vanderbilt, and various other places, say that the impact on academic performance and the impact on social emotional learning is going to be really key. I think it's going to be particularly important as we come back to in-person school, that social emotional learning aspect is really a high priority. But yeah, I think you're starting to see some of that innovation or some of that focus when you start talking about the availability of summer school, the different lengths of academic years going forward. There's a recovery that these young people they've lost some time in the education process, and that's time that is going to be difficult to make up.
Yeah. Well, it needs to remain as the top priority for the city, is getting public education where we need it to be.
It's still our number one priority.
And, knowing the work that you all do, the chamber, with the city when it comes to economic development, and with the state for economic development, and the leadership role you all play, are there still things out there in the pipeline? I think you're bullish on Nashville, which is good, and as am I. But are there people talking? Is there things that may happen in the near future?
The answer is yes. We saw very few, just a couple of prospects leave the pipeline at the onset of the pandemic. And since that time, especially over the course of the summer, we saw small to medium-sized businesses that wanted to relocate to Nashville continuing to seek information or initiating contact and seeking information. But just recently, we've started to see larger projects inquiring as well. So, again, some of that interest from those prospects is going to be dictated by the environment they're in right now. But, we're seeing business picking up on the economic development side in the expansion category and the relocation category. So it's starting to come back, but it did slow down during the pandemic.
And what have we here, Pat?
Get my mute off here. Just throwing a couple of slides up here to show some of the construction, the extended construction. I don't know if Ralph wants to comment on Nashville Yards, the 5th and Broadway, these major projects that we see going in place that are changing the landscape and the skyline of the city.
Now, one of the things I would comment on, you can see here with where the National African American Museum, Music Museum is going, which had its ribbon cutting the other day and will be open to the public. I mean, there's something that the finishing touches, a lot of the interior work was done during this pandemic, and Nashvillians, once this thing is under control, are going to wake up to a city where they have this great new asset, this great new resource. It's going to be a great new resource, not only for Nashville, the city, and our citizens, but also for school kids, but for people all over the country. I mean, it's great reviews of it in the Wall Street Journal, and the New York Times had a great column about it on the editorial page this past week. But to me, that's a home run for the city, and I think that Nashvillians will wake up and see this and see progress has been going on while we've all been staying separate. I think also, I had and Ralph, I'm sure you know more about this than I, but I was at the airport a couple of times during the past 8 or 9 months. And as we wake up to the new airport, the airport is a beautiful building now all of a sudden. I mean, it is, they've done a lot of great work there, and it's all coming together, and there's a couple more years, I guess, in the project. But things have been progressing as we have been socially separate.
You get the same feeling driving down Church Street, heading towards downtown as you go across the train yards and to the left and right, just these buildings that weeks ago or months ago, just there was nothing there.
Yeah, so you kind of feel like we've been through this pandemic, we've been through this economic downturn, but we can see as we drive around, the city's changing, and when we have a chance to go into these buildings, we're going to see that we're in many ways a stronger city than we were before. I mean, progress has gone on.
And you have to give the developers and the investors credit for seeing that Nashville would restore itself quickly, and they continued to build that space and continued to make that space available. You know, we've had a few prospects come into town, actually visit, and you know, they go to places like the Yards and Fifth and Broadway and Capitol View. And when they're in that environment, they say that's the environment, that kind of environment they're looking for to locate their businesses. It's a great blend of the business atmosphere and the residential and the commercial atmosphere in all of these developments. So, you know, those spaces are really attractive to the prospects that are coming into town.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I feel good. This has been a rough year. It's been a year that, well, 2020, hopefully 21 is going to be a great year all around. But the past year was tough, and the city faced enormous challenges with the tornado, a pandemic, social issues raised that needed to be raised, but you know, were raised, and then we have of course the bombing that took place. But I still remain incredibly positive about the city's future. Let me ask you this. You know, I think we're going to see a debate in the next year with the new administration. There's going to be concern, more concern than we've heard for a while, but there'll be concerns voiced about budget deficits on the federal government level. There'll be equal concerns about the need to make sure state and local governments continue to be able to provide basic necessities. But I do think that there will be substantially more money spent in terms of responding to the pandemic, helping people with relief and jobs. Do you think there'll be, this is something you and I have thought about a lot, do you think there'll be infrastructure money for transportation or anything interesting like that in the next couple of years?
Yeah, I think we feel like transportation's going to get a lot of positive attention for cities like ours, especially cities like ours who need to kind of initiate a structure. Yes, we've got public transportation available, but we've kind of long since outgrown the capacity of that transportation. So the answer is yes. I think there will be focus in the administration. And Karl, to be somewhat attentive to what you said earlier in that question, you know, I am already hearing from some business people that are getting a little concerned about national debt, deficits, et cetera. All the indications that we're seeing from this new administration or the people that are close to it, though, is that infrastructure is going to be a high priority, and transportation in particular is going to be a high priority. So we'll see. As you know, the economic opportunity for lots of our population is going to be tied to transportation and connection to between jobs and residential locations. You know, it's truly all connected.
It really is. That's a blast from the past.
Yeah.
Well, Ralph, let me thank you for this. Pat, is there any questions that you have that
We do have a couple of questions that came in. Jim in our Zoom room, he kind of piggybacked on the question about transit. He was curious if the new administration might have an impact on transit. I don't know if you want to add on anything to that, he said he's being patient. I think we all are to see something happen on that score. And I'll toss a couple of questions in here at once so you can sort through them. I think you also talked about education, but we had a question in our Facebook room about the Chamber report on education, your assessment of local schools. Are they good enough to attract young people who are going to raise families here? And then I've got a couple of closings after that.
Well, let me just comment on the education, make an education comment. I, you know, under the current circumstances, I think teachers are working hard, administrators are working hard. Everybody's trying to do the best they can under these circumstances, but everybody agrees that we need to move education forward, and it's going to take more resource, and it's going to take some innovation in the way we operate our schools. Adrian Battle gets high marks from a lot of business people in this community, and there's a feeling that you know she's good leadership for going forward with some of this innovation. But two things: one, people agree it needs to get better, continue to get better, and two, it's an important component of the economy.
Anything more to add on the transportation infrastructure possibilities under a Biden administration?
As much as I think that we are encouraged by what the administration is saying, I think people need to keep in mind that there is going to continue to be required a large investment in transportation and transit by local governments. The days of the large injection of federal funding into the cities for transportation have really kind of come and gone. So I think everybody needs to understand that we're going to have a transportation solution. It's going to require some form of dedicated funding, and the community is going to have to support that dedicated funding to get the transportation system that they're looking for.
Let me combine these two questions, and then I'll be done. Also from the Facebook Live audience, we have so much construction going on. How do you measure the volume of businesses and residents that will end up filling all those buildings? And the other side of growth, Nashville growth comes at some expense, affordable housing, gentrification, and so forth. How do proponents of growth balance those issues with the benefits of growth?
I would tell you that we just finished the work with community leaders on a 5-year economic development plan. And one of the key themes that came out of it was that with the growth of jobs, there's expanded opportunity. But the management of that growth is something that they feel Nashville needs to catch up on a bit. By and large, they feel that managing the growth that's coming is within our capability, but it is something that we need to be more attentive to, because quite honestly, Pat, you know, this city's popular. It remains popular. And the features, the foundation of this city, both economically, socially, culturally, et cetera, continues to be a real magnet for young people. So I think there's agreement even in the business community that managing growth, making sure our neighborhoods stay our neighborhoods, making sure that opportunity is spread across the region, making sure that everybody in the region has an opportunity to benefit from this growth and prosperity and opportunity. I think they feel we need to do some work in all those categories.
We have one last question from Sarah. I think she might have been inspired by these last couple of questions. How do we effectively educate residents on the need for increased local taxes to replace expectations of federal funding, for example, transportation? Is there a Department of Citizen Education, or how do we do that? Well, not Carl, not in your chamber.
You want to take that one, Carl? You want me to comment?
Well, I think it's a great question, because I mean clearly, two of the things I think I've spoken positively of in tonight's programming has been public education, which clearly involves resources. And, one of the issues is paying our teachers what they should be paid and attracting great people into the profession. But it also means having money there to make sure that we're giving enhancements to students who have had a rough 8 or sort of an unstable 8 or 9 months, not of their own fault, but because of the pandemic, how they get ahead. And that's going to require resources. And, people, I'm as guilty as any politician, I suppose, a former politician, of not talking about that enough, but schools need resources. And clearly with transit, it's not I think the costs there are manageable, and there are ways to get federal funding. I think Ralph is absolutely right. There's got to be a local component of that. The days of the federal government coming in and saying we're going to build everything are past. And I think that those realistic conversations need to take place in terms of transit planning. It just doesn't happen for free. I would say, though, that Nashville remains a very attractive place to live and an affordable place to live. And people will be looking, I think I mentioned there'll be concerns about federal budget deficits. There'll be concerns about the enormous challenges that local government is going to face during this economic recovery, as will state governments. And people just need to talk about it honestly.
Well, I think we're close to wrapping up here. Let me make one note that we have a special program coming up on the 28th, a program sponsored by the Korea Economic Institute called The Future of Korea. 2 components. One will be in the morning at 9 a.m. with the Nashville Area Chamber International Business Council. And Ralph, let me express my appreciation from the World Affairs Council for the work that Lori Odom and the IBC is doing on working with us and independently on programs. That will involve speakers from the Department of State, Deputy Secretary of State for Korea and Japan, the Korea Economic Institute, and the Embassy of Korea. Then we'll have an evening program, a town hall meeting with a keynote address from Bob Rolfe, the Commissioner of the Tennessee Economic and Community Development Commission. And that will include those same speakers talking about the overall U.S.-Korea relationship, political, cultural, commercial, et cetera. So Ralph, on that note, any closing comments you might have about the importance of trade and investment, the international things going
on? Global trade, and global investment continues to be the future. Nashville's an attractive place for that future. Our diversity helps us. So, we continue to see positive movement in that category as well.
And we have terrific representation here, the Consulate of Japan and businesses, foreign-based businesses based in Japan that have invested here in Tennessee, very important to the commercial development of our community.
Well, and Patrick, your organization and the IBC do an awful lot to continue to promote that, as does the state ECD operation, very aggressive in making Nashville, Middle Tennessee, and Tennessee known globally.
Yeah, and I would, again, things that have been happening as we've been going through social separation. We had a great conversation with Kate Burke from Alliance Bernstein. I mean, here is a global company that has moved its headquarters to Nashville, settling down here and doing quite well. I mean, I think on the international component to Nashville business is just going to grow and grow, as it will with the nature of our city. It's going to become a much more diverse city, and that's all for the good.
Mm-hmm.
Terrific conversation, gentlemen. Thanks so much. Ralph, we're going to have to make sure that it doesn't go 10 months before we have you back. I think Mayor Dean wanted me to get you on the calendar at least every other week. Is that if that works for your
Ralph,
your
it shouldn't be 10 months, and we can have a calmer time period between one visit to the next. Hopefully it'll all be just good news for the next 5 or 6 months here.
I think the next time we get together, people are going to feel Nashville on the rise again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is.
For
Good.
sure.
Well, thank you, Ralph. Thank you, Pat. Thank you, everybody.
You bet. Thanks, everybody, for coming. And take a look at tnwac.org. Please become a member or support your Tennessee World Affairs Council. Thanks, and everybody have a good evening.